Hold on a second. I'm trying to understand the Rosh. We're going to go and do another part of this sugya back in Menachot. So yeah, so Ron, I think we did this in the Hebrew shir, but it's okay. We're going to do it again. It's always worth doing Chazara.
Sure.
Okay, so I skipped over part of the sugya for now. Eventually, we're going to do this. We'll do all of the parts of this sugya, but for the moment, we're going to look at this. It's a Zamara Vash. Chazina lehu l'safrei davkani devei rav. So Rav Ashi said, I saw the very exacting Sofrim, of the yeshiva of Rav, the house of Rav, and they were chatre luhu legage dechet. They were choter the roof of the pet, and they hung the side or the leg of the hay, the thigh, let's say, of the hay. So this term, the chatre, this is also the subject of a machloket between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. It's quite important, but it's not the subject of what we're going to do right now, so skipping it. I want to focus on the second part, Tali Lekrai Dehe, that they hung the thigh of the hay, the kara of the hay. So, right? So this, whatever they did to the roof of the chet, it was to symbolize that that He, that is God, lives in the heights of the universe. And they hung the kara of the hay, and it's the reason that they hung this part of the hay over here is because of, we'll see in the discussion that's based on this question that Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya asked of Rabbi Ami. So what was his question? He said, "My dichti b'tchub Hashem adayad ki biya Hashem tzur alamim." Why is it written that you should trust in Hashem forever? Because with God, Hashem is the rock of the eternities or the world. Amarle. So, right. So Rabbi Ami answers him. He says it means Kol hatoleh b'tchono b'Kadosh Baruch Hu, harei lo machseh b'olam hazeh u'le'olam haba. Means anybody who hangs his trust in the Holy One, blessed be He, so he has a protection or a protector in this world and in the world to come. And Rashi just explains how this is what the verse is implying. Al shabihu b'Hashem adayad, because you trust in Hashem forever. Havu lahem bi Hashem machseh. Then, therefore, thereby you have in God a protector, sur ma'oz la'olamim, a rock of strength for eternities. So that's basically the pshat of the pasuk, right? Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya says, "Amarle ana hachi kakasheli." He says, actually, this is what is difficult for me. My shna dichtiv bi ya, v'lo ktiv ya. What is this beit here that's added? Why does it say ki bi ya Hashem sur olamim? Why doesn't it just say ki ya Hashem sur olamim or ka Hashem sur olamim? Why doesn't it just say that? What is bi? What does that add? What does that tell me? So he answers, Kedidara Rabbi Yehuda ben Bar Rabbi Elai. Elu shnei olamot shepara HaKadosh Baruch Hu echad behei v'echad b'yud. So he explains, actually, yes, there's a drasha that Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eli said that the way to read this pasuk is to understand that this refers to two worlds, two universes that the Kadosh Baruch Hu created. One of them he created with the hay, one of them he created with the yud. Yad behay, yad b'yud. So what does he mean? Before we go on, just so you understand, he's reading the pasuk a little differently. Now he says, "Tiku Hashem adei ad," that remains the same. And instead of saying "Ki bekach Hashem sur olamim," he reads it "Ki bi yud hey Hashem sur olamim." That with the yud and the hey, Hashem is the creator of universes. So the pasuk tells me now that Hashem created two universes, one with the hey and one with the yud. Ve'eni yodei ma'olam haba b'yud ve'olam hazeh b'hei, ma'olam hazeh b'yud ve'olam haba b'hei. All right. So just based on this verse alone, I don't know which letter was used to create which universe. I don't know if this world is created with the yud, and the world to come is created with the yud, and this world is created with the hey, or if this world is created with the yud, and the world to come is created with the Kishihu Omer. So when the Torah tells us, Eila toldot hashamayim va'aretz v'hi baram, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth in their creation. Tikre b'hi baram. Don't read that straight as if this is one word, b'hi baram. Ella behei b'ra'am. Read it as to say that these are the generations of the heavens and the earth. They were created with a hey, behei b'ra'am. So that teaches me what? Now what do I know? Which world is created with the letter hey? Olam hazeh, right? Because that's talking about the creation, right? We just read this. So by implication, Olam haba was created with the letter yud, right? Havi omer. So then, based on that, you'll say Olam hazeh behei, Olam haba b'yud. So now, okay, so far so good. So what we see from the Gemara is this idea that we have two worlds. We have this world and the world to come. This world was created with the letter hey. The world to come was created with the letter yud. So why was it that this world was created with the letter hey? Because it's similar to an achsadra, a portico. That anyone who wants to leave may leave. So an achsadra is, I think that's the translation, portico. And we see it actually, it's brought up in other areas of halacha. This was and this kind of building still exists, but popular, was a common kind of structure at the time of the Mishnah. And the achsadra is basically a covered sidewalk that goes right next to a building. So it's like a sidewalk that's right next to a building. There is on top there is a roof, and that's basic. That's the basic idea of the achsadra. So one side of the achsadra is the building, right? So it's like a solid wall, and there's a roof, but solid roof, and then of course columns periodically to hold up the roof, and the rest of it is open, right? So this world, the hay, is like an achsadra. It has basically that same kind of structure. When we look at the hay, right? So we see it has the roof, and it has the side, which, in a regular Achsadra would be the side of the building that it's next to. And then the Nikuda of the hay, the Kara of the hay, that's us. That's us as people, as we will see. That why was this world created with the letter Hey? Because it's similar to an Achsadra. Just like a person who's walking in an Achsadra, he can leave. He can go out here, he can go out there. There's different ways for him to leave the Achsadra. If he wants, he can leave. So, my ta'ama Talia Krai, why is it that it's this nikuda is hanging? Di'i hadar b'tshuva ma'ayalale. Because if he returns in tshuva, right, if he repents, then he's lifted ma'ayalale. He's lifted up. They lift him up, or Hashem lifts him up, or brings him in. Is actually the more literal translation. La'ayel bahach. So let him go up. Let him go in here. Okay. So what's going on? So just imagine if we look at the letter Hey, and this nikuda represents each of us as individuals. So this world, we're in the Achsadra, which is this world, and if we want, we can go out. So we can go out by dropping down, go downwards, or we could try to go up, or we could go out to the side, right? So the idea is anybody who wants to go out may go out. And Rashi explains here, Shedomel Achsadra, that this world is like the Achsadra, Shepatuach mitachta, because it's open on the bottom. In other words, it's open below the roof. And the way the hay is, of course, in the way the hay is constructed, there isn't an actual bottom, right? There isn't a base to the hay like there is to, let's say, the letter bet or the letter mem or something like that. The hay on the bottom is open. So anybody who wants to go out, you'll say, anybody who wants to go out of this world or go out of this achsadra, this existence, to bad society, right? To a bad kind of way of living, he can go out. He can leave. He has that choice. And any right. So why is it hanging? Why is the kara hanging? Because if he wants to do tshuva, ma'ayalele or ma'alinle, Rashi says, you bring him up. B'fetach ha'oyom, bein regel. Hold on a second. Bein regel shebetocho legago. If he wants to come in, he can come in through the top opening between the regel, the kara, that's inside of it, and the roof. In other words, the expand this a little. Just a second. So Rashi means like this, right? So he means if he wants, he can come in through here, through the between this nikuda and this open spot. In other words, what the Medrash is explaining to us is why this nikuda is not connected to the roof, because there has to be this opening in case the yud of the hay, which represents us, if we decide to leave, that is to leave and go our own way, but then if we want to find a way, right, so then we're kind of on our own, but if we want to come back, Hashem will bring us back through this opening here, not through the bottom. And why is that? Right? We're going to bring him in through this opening on the top that's between what we'll call the yud of the hay now. We now have three terms for it. It's also called a regel, a yud, and a kara, but I'll just call it the yud for our purposes. Shebetocho legago. And so the Gemara says, okay, so if he wants to, right, if he does tshuva, that's where he'll come back in through. So Ulayel Bahach, let him come up there, or let him come up, as Rashi says, Bepetach HaTachton, D'Nafik Bey. Let him come up through the opening that's on the bottom of the hay. That's where he went out. Why doesn't he just come back the same way he had left? So Gemara says, Lo Mistayim Milta. It won't help him at all. K'deresh Lakish, like Reish Lakish says, Dama Reish Lakish, my dichtiv in leitzim hu yalit v'tein chen. I forgot to add this pasuk in Mishlei. In the pasuk means where im here would mean, let's say, whereas to those who are who make people who make fun, who would be considered to be arrogant, hu yelitz, then he will also, degrade, be arrogant and degrade them. But to humble ones, he will give his grace, right? So this is that's the plain pshat in the pasuk in Mishlei. So Reish Lakish says, why is it written? What's the meaning though of this verse? So he says, if he comes to make himself pure, we help him. We, in other words, meaning the Kadosh Baruch Hu will help him. But if he comes to make himself tameh, we open for him. What does it mean that we open for him? In other words, Hashem opens the depths. If somebody wants to become tameh, Hashem doesn't do anything to help him become tameh. He just gives him the option because this area, right? Remember, we're the nekudah of the hay. The area is open. There is no bottom here. So the default situation of us as human beings is we're born into this world in this hanging state, in this kind of limbo. If we want to go out to tarbut ra'ah, right? If we want to go out and mingle in bad company, then we can just fall out. We can just go down. And that's potchim lo. But if we want to become tahor, then misayin, then Hashem will help him. That is, he'll help him to come up into, since he'll now need help, he can't go back the way he came. He'll need help, he has to go back in through here, through the opening here. Now, let's just look real quickly at Rashi. Lo mistaye milta, right? So if somebody wants to come back the way they came, it doesn't help. Rashi says here, the habali taher bai siyua mipnei yetzer hara. Because somebody who wants to make himself tahor needs help because of the evil inclination. Hilkach avdi le siyua petach yetera. Therefore, they made for him, Hashem makes for him this aid, this help, by having an extra opening. Right? So it's not open only on the bottom, it's also open on the top. So the way the drasha reads is in leitzim hu yelitz, it means that the who here can refer either, you might think that it refers to God, but it could also just refer to the leitzim themselves. If in the leitzim, right, people who are leitzim, I should have gotten a better translation. But leitzim are maligim, right? Like people who make fun and and aren't taking life seriously and they degrade other people. Who yelitz, right? So petech lo liot late. So who yelitz, Hashem lets him be a late. He just lets him be a late. That's potchin lo. He opens up that option for him, but God doesn't make him become a late. That's just the way he'll let him be. But in contrast, ulanavim yitein chen, God will actively give grace to those who are humble, right? So somebody who's trying to do tshuva is already in a state of humility because they have already, if you're doing tshuva, you've had to acknowledge that you've sinned, and that's already the beginning of a state of humility. Messianoto, alma bai siua, right? Messianoto, Messianoto tells me that if you come to make yourself tahor, Hashem helps you. It implies that you need help. So this is a very profound idea, and it's discussed also in Hilchot Tshuva, in various collections of Hilchot Tshuva, and that this is a very basic concept that Tshuva is something that God gives us, that grants us as human beings. It's a kind of thing, and it's not something that we can actually do ourselves, or at least not easily. The Rambam goes into a lot of discussion about this, in particular in Hilchot Tshuva, and it raises the question about, about Paro, that Hashem was Machmir at Libo, and what does all that mean? So that one understanding of that is that Hashem wouldn't help him to do tshuva anymore. He took away the help. And if you don't have Hashem's help to do tshuva, like in other words, you have to be like a partner with Hashem to do tshuva. If you don't have Hashem's help to do tshuva, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely, extremely difficult. So we get a little bit of musar from the Turat Otei. And why does it have a crown? Rashi says, lehe. Why does the hay have a crown? It has a little crown at the end of the roof of the hay. So why does it have the crown? If he goes back on it, in other words, if he does tshuva, ani kosher lo kesher, I will tie for him a knot. And this term kesher is used in relationship to the tagim, right? The Gemara just prior to this brings the famous story of Moshe Rabbeinu coming to get the Torah and finding that Hashem is tying the crowns onto the letters. So the term kesher here refers to the crown. So if he does tshuva, so in other words, this is kind of a follow-up, right? So this person who's hanging, if he does tshuva, Hashem will let him come back in through this upper opening, and then he'll give him a crown. And all of this is represented by the Tzurat Otei. Mibnei ma nivra ha'olam haba b'yud. And why was the next world, why was Olam Haba created with Yud? Mibnei shetzadikim shebo muatim. Because the tzadikim in it are few. There are very few righteous people that manage to get to it. So when Hashem, as it were, constructed the world to come, it didn't have to be nearly as big as this world, which is a little depressing, but...
Oh, if we disembodied, perhaps we're much smaller.
Yeah, maybe we get compressed, yes. And this is the part that's important for our discussion. And why is its head bent? Why is the head of the Yud bent? Because the righteous people in Olam Haba, their heads are bent. And why are their heads bent? Because of their deeds. Because of their deeds that are not similar one to the other. Rashi explains, "Masem ein domim, uchvodo shel zeh gadol mishel zeh," and this one's honor is greater than this one's. In other words, each tzaddik will perceive that the honor of the one next to him is greater than his own. He will all right because they're tzaddikim. They're going to be very humble people, and they'll consider that everybody else who's there must be greater than they are. Yishum hachi, because of that, Roshehem kfufim, because of that their heads are bent. Demit bayesh mechaveiro, because he's embarrassed in front of his fellow tzaddik. So it discusses a little bit last time, and it's worth mentioning again that the Gemara, and even in some of the early post-Gemara literature, doesn't have these kinds of detailed descriptions of all of the letters. That starts to get written down much later. We see from the Gemara, we see from certain midrashim, both midrashei Haggadah and midrashei Halacha, that there was an assumption that everybody knew what the basic letter forms were, but the way that Chazal speak about them, they refer to different details, different aspects of the letter, which they also assume to be there, but we only find out because they're talking about it. So in this little discussion, everybody knows what the basic structure of the letter Hey is, but what's not clear is does this nikudah of the Hey touch the roof of the Hey or not? And does it, and also we have now another element that it has this crown. I was going to make another surah here, and I'll prepare this hopefully for next time. I did want to point out that this Hey, which I've chosen to use here, is probably not really the best Hey to illustrate what the Gemara was talking about. I made an illustration of a chet. This chet is also not perfect, but if you've ever seen the letters from the Dead Sea Scrolls, right, and there are different scripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but you'll see in a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the chet and the Hey are almost, sometimes they're identical, or they're virtually identical. They have almost exactly the same figure. And what I mean by that is that in a lot of the Kibbutz Yamamenach, the left leg touches the roof. And the way you would distinguish it, in at least some of the manuscripts, the way you'll distinguish it from the chet is the chet also has something sticking out on top, and the Hey doesn't. So this whole question, in other words, to us, it seems so obvious that of course you hang this part of the Hey. But in earlier scripts, that was not the default, that wasn't the only Surat Ot Hey. There was a Hey that was made where the regel smoli touched the roof, and it didn't look like this Yud the way we make it now. It looked just like the right leg. So I need to point that out, and that I think helps us to understand what Rav Ashi wanted to emphasize here when he said, "I saw the exacting Sofrim that they were toleh l'krai Hey." In other words, it means not all the Sofrim were toleh. Not all of the Sofrim made sure that this didn't touch, but the exacting ones did. And that's an important point. And of course, this is a halachic issue. What's the din of a Hey if this nikudah here touches the roof? So I won't delve into that now because of limited time, but it's definitely something we will come back to, and we will see different halachic opinions in that regard. So what do we get out of all this? We understand at the end of this sugya, we understand that the Hey has this leg that's hung. It has a crown. We also understand that the head of the Yud is bent, right? Those are all things that we know now. So let's go and just a second. Let's see if I can. Okay. Do you see Tosfos Varosh on the
Yep.
screen? Okay. Thanks. Okay, so in the last year that I recorded, I did Tosfos. And I started the Rosh, and I got up to here in the Rosh, if I recall correctly, where the Rosh is discussing the Shita of Rabbeinu Tam and Surat Ot Yud, and he brings the Psikta. So we'll see now the Psikta, right, which is one of the post-Talmudic collections of Midrash. It's an early Midrash. It has a Midrash that's almost the same as the Sugya that we just did now in Menachot, but there are some differences, and that's why the Rosh is going to bring it, because of the slight differences. So just to review, Yud, Omer Rabbeinu Tam she'ismo kafuf lemata kazeh, but the left side has to be bent down like this. So I'm not going to go through the whole reasoning of Rabbeinu Tam right now, but I will point out something that I don't remember now if I said this in the recording or not. But this is a very important point because it will come up again and again. With this Rabbeinu Tam, we are introduced to an idea that there is such a thing as a Tzurat Ot that we can recognize as a Tzurat Ot. In other words, we know what letter it is, but it may be halachically deficient and therefore pasul. There will be some technical aspect that's missing that makes it pasul, even though we see what letter it is, right? We didn't get that necessarily from Rashi, because Rashi talks only about the regel yemini, and the implication is that if we took away the regel yemini, there wouldn't be a yud there. But what Rabbeinu Tam now is telling us is that Rashi's yud, yes, that's a yud, but that's not what the Gemara is talking about when it's talking about kotso shel yud. It's talking about this coats here on the bottom left, which is formed when you bend the head in that direction. You bend the head forward, and you get that coats. So Rabbeinu Tam acknowledges that this is a yud, but he's saying it's pasul. This is a yud pasul. If you find this in tefillin, the tefillin are pasul. They'll only be kosher if they have this tzura. I'm not doing a good job of highlighting, but if it has this tzura. Okay, so now the Rosh, right, it's basically summarized the Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi. Excuse me. And now he says, Yamru nami b'psikta. And they also said in the Psikta, Hi ka Hashem tzur olamim, right? So we know this pasuk from the Gemara that we just said. Ha'olam hazeh nivra behei, v'ha'olam haba b'yud. Right? So he skips over the part that explains that it's, in other words, that what we saw, that it's breaking up this word, be, yud, hey, right? So this world is created with the hey, and the world to come is created with the letter yud. Ma yud. Now it's going to tell us more about the yud. Ma yud yeshlo nikuda achat lemata, which I have here, number 2, the bottom left. This alludes to the dead who go down to Gehinnom. The nikuda achat lemala has 1 nikuda on top. Here, number 3. Romez sha'atidin la'alot, and that alludes to the idea that those who die and go down to Gehinnom, in the future they will come up, they will rise. Shenemar shemei mitu b'chayei morid sha'ol ya'al, right? That in the Tefillah of Chana, she alludes to this idea of Tchiyat HaMeitim, which the Psikta now is telling us is alluded to in the very shape of the Yud. Very shape of the Yud. So that Olam Haba, that's where dead people are going to go, is Olam Haba. So the dead will go, and they will go, all of them, not necessarily all of them, but some of them at least will go down, and that's the point here. But eventually they will rise up. V'hei patuch l'chol tzad. The hay is open on all sides, not literally all sides, but it's open in at least in two sides. Remez l'balei tshuva, it alludes to balei tshuva. So it doesn't go into any greater detail here, but it seems to be the same direction as what we saw in the Gemara. Yud kafu, remez l'baei olam. The Yud is bent. It alludes to those who are coming into Ba'ei Olam, in other words, those who are coming into the world to come. Shiyuk Fufim, that they should be bent. Nefchu panim l'yerakon, and all faces turned green. I believe this is saying essentially the same thing as the Gemara said in Menachot. What does it mean all faces turn green? Their faces are bent down and they're embarrassed. That's why their panim are yerakon. Okay, but what we get from it, the Rosh is going to draw some conclusions. This is the Rosh speaking. Tag v'yud lamala v'gam kafuf lamata. According to this, there's a tag on the top left, and it's also bent down on the bottom left. We have shar, but he also gives another possible pshat. The shar, the kotso shel yud, the perakakomex, the kots of the yud, which is at the beginning of the sugya that we saw in perakakomex, hainu tag shel mala. Maybe the kotso shel yud, when it says lo nitzuch el kotso shel yud, the only reason I need the Mishnah to tell me that afilu katav echad ma'akev, it means that if it's missing this number 3, the tag on the bottom left, on the top left, hainu tag shamala, maybe that's the kotso shel yud. V'yud kafuf, but now of course he still has to understand. He has to answer Rabbeinu Tam, because Rabbeinu Tam says, no, the kotso shel yud is the same thing as yud kafu. And so that tells me that there's codes down here on the bottom left. He says, no, maybe yud kafu find the regular yemini. Maybe the bent head is the right leg. Now, I wanted to bring you a different tzura, and I'll try to repair it for next time. Again, also, if you look in the Kitven Yam HaMelach, the yud looks a little bit more like this, except it's a little bit sharper, it has a sharper edge. And the point is, when it says kafuf rosh, what is the rosh? What's the head of the yud? So what did Rabbeinu Tam think the head of the yud was? Which part of the yud does he think is the head of the yud? Well, he says kafuf no sho, the head is bent. So he means, it sounds like he means that the head of the yud is going to be the left side of the yud. That part is going to be bent down, and that will create the coats on the bottom left. But the Rosh says maybe the head of the yud is just this whole stroke. That's the head of the yud. And if the head of the yud is bent, well, like this, it's bent on the left. It could also it could be only bent on the right. In other words, here this is the head. I didn't do it well because it looks like there's a tail hanging out, but maybe a little bit more like this. In other words, this whole thing is just one stroke where it's bent on the right and it's bent on the left. But if I only bent it on the right, I could say that's kafuf rosh. That's also kafuf rosh. So the rosh introduces a couple of elements that we didn't see before, right? So he introduces this idea that, first of all, he's the first one of these Rishonim who talks about the idea that there is a kotz lamala, right? That there's a tag or a kotz that's on the top left. Rashi didn't mention this, and Rabbeinu Tam didn't mention this. But and this is one of the reasons that the Rosh brings the Psikta, because in the Psikta it's mentioned explicitly that there's a nikuda chat lamala, so that must be this. So according to the Rosh, it's fair to say that you have to have this tag here on the top left. And according to this last possibility, this is not a clear psak from the Rosh. And he says, Efshar, it could be that I don't need this kotz number 2, kotz of Rabbeinu Tam. I don't need that, and I could still understand the Gemara. Because I could say, okay, I have the nikudah here on the top left, that's from the Psikta, and the bottom right, that's the kfifat harosh. That's how the head is bent. And I don't need this at all. So that's a very important point because for halachic reasons, okay, so in what we write now, in the Beit Yosef script, in the Ari script, we write a yud that's essentially like this. Traditionally, Sfardim didn't have a kotz on the bottom left. And in fact, in many scripts, this was very much rounded, the bottom left. And so what the Rosh says here is effectively a defense for that Surat Ot. It's as a basis from the Psikta. And just to remind ourselves that the Rosh, who was originally from Germany, but he then had to flee to Spain, and he spent the rest of his life in Spain, and he would have seen the Sephardi writing. The Rosh, by the way, says elsewhere in one of his Tshuvot, and many Rishonim say this, but the Rosh in particular was one of the people to say it, he acknowledges that there are many styles of writing, and that they're all kosher. The general rule is, as long as the style of writing doesn't contradict something that's in the Gemara, right? So by this, the Rosh has given us a defense for the Sephardi Yud. Okay, are there any questions about what we've done so far? No? Okay.
The Psikta, what is the generally accepted time of publication or editing?
You know what?
How much later than the Gemara?
I will check. I could do a quick check actually. It seemed to remember that it's one of the earlier midrashim. Actually, I might have a hard time doing it because I don't have Hebrew. Oh, here we go. Babati. But there's an English. Let's see what they say in the Wikipedia.
8:45 CE.
Yeah, is that what it says? Oh yes, 8:45 CE. It was composed about 8:40, right? So in other words, it was like in the Gaonic period. But these,
Right.
like the Psikta and the Tanchuma and also the Midrashay Rabbah, some of them, so what you, when we say they're composed, that's when they were like redacted, right? Because they're drawing on earlier sources. Sometimes like you see from here, the Psikta is drawing on either the Gemara or a source that was common with the source that's brought in the Gemara, right? Because it has the base that they both have the same basic drasha, but the Psikta goes in a slightly different direction. Okay. Let me just think for a second because I want to wrap up for now. You know what? Due to technical issues and also because Linda has to leave, I'm going to stop now. And Bezrat Hashem will continue next week in the, we'll go back to the Beit Yosef. And I may have some other sources to send you in the interim. And but in the meantime, that's it for now. Thank you so much.
Much.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. It's great to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shem.
Will too.